Great, then let's begin. So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Community Talks, the webinar series that's sponsored by Farnek and organized by the CM Today magazine. It sheds light on the lessons that one has learned, especially during the time of the pandemic. Now, I'm Megha Anthony, I'm the editor of CM Today and your host this afternoon. Now, today, as the country has kind of opened up post the lockdown, and a lot of things have changed the way we have perceived our environment and become a lot more conscious about a lot of things that we earlier kind of took granted for. Now, adapting to the new normal has somehow become the norm of the movement. But in all this, I want to bring the spotlight on something that not a lot of us have had the privilege to feel, and that's happiness. Now, I remember in January 2019, UAE had revealed a national community design policy for building happier communities. Now, in the most simplest of forms, this policy included a lot of things for a community to support the human well-being. Largely, they identified six kind of rules, which is for a happier community. That is the location, the right design format, connectivity, social spaces, cultural expression, and smart systems, of course. Now, however, the pandemic has changed a lot of things, and including how we perceive happiness today. So today, to discuss this with us, we have Mr. I think we've lost Mr. Samuel. Not able to see him. Great. So we have with us Mr. Alan Rowlands, the GM of 360 Communities, and Mr. Samuel Joshua, who is also known as the OA Ninja. So thank you for being here and taking time out for us. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming today.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you, Megha.
Great. I think we're just kind of getting Samuel back on with us. So before we start off the discussion and we wait for Samuel to just log in, I'd like to encourage our audience to talk, take this opportunity and, talk to us and ask us your questions and doubts during the course of our discussion. Great. Nice to have you back, Samuel. So, before we start off with the discussion, as I said earlier, I want to encourage the audience to take this opportunity to share your opinions, your questions. I want to keep this as engaging as possible. Of course, a lot of you who've been with us earlier for our earlier sessions know how it works. So I want to take in and make this discussion as lively as possible. So let's start the discussion, and I want to start it off by addressing the question to both of you. What is happiness now, especially post the lockdown? What has really changed? If we can start with you, Mr. Allen.
Okay, well, what is happening now? So, clearly we've moved from a lockdown situation into a more, not a relaxed, but certainly rules are changing and things are opening up. I guess with mall openings, shop openings, subject to social distancing and all of the other mores that are required by the whole pandemic situation. Within our communities, what we're seeing is there has been obviously some relaxing in terms of opening common areas such as the gyms, the swimming pools, all the facilities that have previously been completely shut. These are subject to quite stringent rules. As an example, for swimming pools, the circular that came out on the 11th of July from Dubai Health Authorities was that there are significant steps that must be taken to ensure that safety is kept when pools are open. And, it's just very symptomatic of all of the kind of steps that have been taken, whether it's a swimming pool or any common area, in that, there's massive sanitization procedures, ensuring that wherever there are touch points, whether it be swimming pool rails, sunbeds, anything that people would be exposed to touching or sharing are completely sanitized, and there's very little risk of infection. Gymnasiums are the same. There's strict social distancing rules, sanitization of all equipment, making sure that equipment is sanitized before and after use, making sure that everyone brings their own towels, making sure that masks are in play, and I guess specifically within our communities, that's the kind of thing that we're just starting to see happen. And I am very, very recognized the fact that the residents in our communities essentially don't need to be policed or told, because they're as concerned about what is happening within their communities as we are concerned about ensuring that their communities are kept safe. So that's what we're just starting to see happening now within our communities. And we can't say after COVID-19, because we are really still quite in the middle of it. We're really in the thick of it.
Yeah, I mean, I'd rather call it post the lockdown. But Mr. Samuel, what about you? What does happiness in all this mean to you? I mean, what do you feel is the situation before the lockdown and now post it?
So, in line with what Alan said, I totally agree. So we are in post the lockdown, and right now what's happening is that we are opening up a lot of access to people, and people are able to bring their families and everything, and get a sense of the community. Because what has happened during the lockdown is that people are contained, and the level of engagement was fairly down. But right now, since the government is helping us to open up and make sure that families can come out, and also there's a sense of in the environment being much more safer. A couple of weeks ago, when everything was under lockdown, people had a very tough time adjusting themselves and their families, and especially when you have kids and when you have communities that are so interactive and they are put under lockdown. There was a sense of not being able to get out, and now since the government is helping us to relax all the rules in terms of opening up the pools, opening up the gym, people are able to get out and see the world and everything, and you can actually see Dubai opening up right now, and which is the a proper decision going forward, because previously it was under lockdown, and now the idea is to make sure that we slowly get used to the current world of post-COVID, because right now the situation is totally not out of control. We have not crossed the COVID, and there's no vaccination, but we are just able to see people coming out and being able to relax a little bit. So I see a lot of improvement. I see a lot of communities where it's almost like I'm good in gardening. What I can see, it's like the communities are flowering up right now. That's what I would say right now.
Sure. But following that, what are some of the common concerns, especially for property managers, when it comes to dealing with, the occupants or the owners in this kind of a situation?
So just getting away from property manager, we should be called
Samuel, sorry.
Community managers.
Yeah.
In fact,
community managers.
Community managers, yes, that's how we like to be called. But when you think about what a community manager actually does, you think about the two most fundamental basic needs that a human has, which is essentially food and shelter. And when you think about what we do, we're really looking after one of those massively fundamental basic human needs, which is shelter, for those that have decided to buy and dwell or reside in a commonly owned property that we would manage. And so in terms of what we need to do, or what we do, it's not terribly far removed from what we always do, which is to make sure that the environment that our customers live in is well maintained, is safe, and that they have a quality of life, and that also, given that for most people the purchase of a home that they live in, or for investors that are buying a property to simply get an investment return or return of income on, it's very, very important to them that quality is maintained to ensure the value is maintained or even enhanced. And so all of the things that were very important for us to do previously haven't changed. And what has changed is that we've been hit with a pandemic, which has added another paradigm into what we do. And it's all about a feeling of safety, security, and comfort within the properties that our customers live in. And there's an awful lot of concern and worry and from people just wondering what impact it has on them, particularly when we're sharing common areas. It's not like you're living in your villa, you can hop in your car and drive out down the road and be completely within your own bubble. We're essentially having sometimes buildings that have up to 700 apartments or more, and every one of those different families living in the same bubble, using the same common areas and common spaces. So for us, COVID-19 has just added another element to what it is that we're always having to do. And so from a community management perspective, what has changed was firstly we had to deal with the significant lockdown measures. And then as lockdown has been removed, we then have to deal with, well, how do we still keep our people safe? How do we make sure that social distancing regimes are in place? How do we make sure that sanitisation is done? What happens when there is an infection in your building? One of the residents is infected and that has to be managed. And so, and now, of course, we're facing, as I mentioned before, the opening up of the common areas or the communal facilities such as pools and gyms and all of the other things that we provide. So, it's just another element to what we've always been doing.
Right. Before we get into those kind of elements and the kind of practices that one is getting into, what I also want to ask both of you is, of course, there's a lot we have spoken about the kind of mental state that the occupants are in, but also we need to address the internal happiness as well. How essential is that, and what can companies do to ensure that even their employees are internally happy in order to ensure the community is happy in return? Mr. Allen, would you like to take that question?
Okay, I was just waiting my turn, but you're talking about keeping our staff happy as well as the people in the community?
Yes, about internal happiness as well as, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so talking about community happiness, many things can define happiness in a community, and for many people, happiness means different things. So, for example, happiness to an investor might be keeping the service charges as low as he can possibly keep them. So it gives him a good return on investment. Happiness to someone living in a community would be the feeling of safety and security and quality of life. And so for those things, they may be prepared to pay a slightly higher service charge because they want to have different quality, they may have different quality standards. And then you've got different buildings which have different expectations in terms of quality as well. So, you'd have a building of the likes of Le Rev, which may have a significantly higher expectation of quality than perhaps a smaller low-rise building that's not in that kind of position or location. And that's not to say that every building deserves to have the best possible maintenance that can be provided, but the happiness is measured differently depending on who you're dealing with and what they're looking for. And interestingly, I think that if you went and lobbied or surveyed many people who are the owners, whether they're owner-occupiers or investors, a large part of their happiness would be measured by how low their service charges are. But that doesn't say that for the residents of the community, their happiness has a whole different measure. Their happiness would be specifically related to the community aspects of the property that they live in. So we've got to cover all the bases. We have to cover the interests of those who have a specific financial interest, and we have to cover the bases of those who have a specific community aspect. And that's why the role of the community manager is so demanding and so wide, because what meets the needs of one may not necessarily meet the needs of the other. So it's always a fine line between one or the other. In terms of the staff working in our buildings, the front line, the real heroes in all of this, these guys need to be absolutely sure that, they are safe as well. And, we must do our utmost when we're talking and dealing with our service providers in the building, that they understand all of the rules, they understand the best things are being done for them, and specifically they understand what their obligations are in terms of keeping the whole community safe. So their happiness is based on ensuring, I guess, one, that they've still got a job, and two, that the job that they're doing is being done in a way that keeps them safe, as well as all of the community that they're working in safe.
Right. I mean, of course, we've spoken that about the internal happiness. And Mr. Samuel, I would like to come to you. And, would you want to address some of the common concerns that you have seen that's going on in the market? And we'll, of course, get into one of the comments that we have got as well from Mr. Tony.
Yeah. So some of the common concerns is, first of all, it's the communication and the engagement. Engagement levels at this point of time needs to be extremely high. In our companies, what we do is that we have made it a purpose to make sure that the engagement level of the community and also the engagement level of the employees inside are, in line with each other. Because employees, like Alan said, are the people that are, making sure that they are able to take the value of the company and show to the customer. And in terms of the time right now, people are stuck inside their home. And what we had done is we opened up channels of communication. We have been able to make sure that, just even information that is, spread across to the customer is proper, because timely information has to be timely, it has to be engaging, and it also has to, reach them properly, because at this point of time, there's just too many rumors going on, too much of messages that are not proper that are going on. So we have made it a mandatory item to meet with the team, literally making sure that the community manager is able to follow through. Because if he or she is not able to think right and they are stressed out with their own jobs, it's very hard for them to handle a community where there are so many people. It's literally a mob and they have to control the mob. So what we do is that one of our participants here is Glenn, and Glenn has been able to make sure that he brings the community managers together to get our community to make sure that we as community managers are able to take the challenges and make sure that the customers, even when they have common questions, there have been questions, about pool. There was a customer who asked, you're opening up the pool, I'm going to jump in. What if there was a COVID person? So common knowledge, like, testing a person before they enter, making sure that they understand all of this, it's very key. And making sure that, if all these questions are managed and they are, properly communicated, internal happiness is easy to achieve. And what we are doing has been giving us really good results in, our pursuit of happiness, and making sure that if the customers are there and customers have questions, they are also answered on time and they are able to feel comfortable and they're able to understand the community well.
Yeah, I think that kind of sets the base for what Ms. Tony also has mentioned, and I'll just read it out. He says that tenants need to be responsible at all times, and there is only so much guidance or signage or literature that can be given and even stuck on the wall, on floors, and etc. Now, each and every individual tenant and visitor must adhere to this, and I have seen this slipping every day now. Now, the FM and the community manager can manage the visitors, the delivery, the subcontractors by ensuring that they have the correct PPE and the measures in place, though this is futile if the OAs or the CMs do not continuously educate and remind their tenants of their responsibilities. Now,
yeah, it always reminds me of the old adage that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
Exactly.
And quite often what's good for somebody is not necessarily what they want to do. So, Tony's quite right in saying that, if standards are set, one rule should apply to everybody, and that you can't take the pedal off the metal. You've got to keep your foot down, particularly when with this particular pandemic is showing it's got a very long tail, and any event could just release it again. So you have to be extremely attentive, and as Tony says, you must communicate. You must open lines, different lines of communication, and that's not just the way of communicating to tenants and residents. That's actually opening channels for everybody to work with your company in a paperless environment. Now, so what we've done is we've ensured that there are so many different, or we've increased the availability of touchless channels for people to work with us. So, we've had to stop people coming into the office. I mean, that's not possible anymore, particularly during the lockdown period. It's more difficult to have face-to-face meetings with people on many occasions. And so it's difficult for people to, for example, come in and pay their service charge bill or their utility bill. And so we've got to be able to provide methods for them. We've got to increase methods and platforms for people to be able to contact, communicate with us, to do things like move in, move out on e-files. Every time that a customer needs to interact with us, we've got to provide a different platform rather than just the old method of face-to-face or call into the office and fill out a form. And so that's been a very important element of what we've been doing. There's a mention there on the chat about SMS as well. I mean, SMS is clearly the tool that is going to get everybody, as long as you have everybody's information. And so here's one of the ironies about community management, in that we manage a community, and yet there's no obligation. There is an obligation, but it's very few times paid heed to, for an owner or a property manager to pass on tenancy details to the community manager. So, we've all taken whatever steps every company wants, whether it's through a mobile application or a web application or processes in place, to try and get as much information about people staying in our building as possible. And that's really been a challenge, because again, there's no nexus essentially between the tenant moving in, except perhaps if we get them at the move-in stage, to be able to capture that information. And it's vitally important to have that, because if you can't communicate to everybody, you're just not covering the bases. And so one of the greatest things that we've found we've had to do is, from a company perspective, is to increase the paperless or the touchless methods of people taking activities or managing activities with us, and also providing them plenty of opportunities to contact and get things done without necessarily having to physically come and see us, or us physically having to go to see them. So that's been really, really important.
Right. And Mr. Sam, I think there was that question that was addressed to you as well, where, wouldn't regular SMS communication be addressed most general points of communication quickly and easily? So would you want to give your take as well on that?
Yes. So like Amit has pointed out, the SMS communication of general points, what we are trying to do is that if there are daily updates, if there's a DM circular, if there's a circular from the government, we are trying to update people and make them understand the situations, and also some of the common things. The gym is right now open, but the sauna is not open. So to do with communication is the most important part in making sure that people understand. And like SMS communications, there's also different modes of communication that we are using right now. So in terms of services, to pay their service charges for move in, move out. And at this point of time, there is also the agencies, the government agencies that are, having its own, internal delays, just like a person moving in and not able to getting their ijari, right? So these kind of common issues where we understand that, we can get the ijari in the next couple of days, but you got to give it time for people to move in. So these are some of the things that we are doing internally to make sure that people are not hassled. Because right now, for somebody to get ijari, it's taking much longer than usual. And there are rules that are there, but also understanding the need of the moment is the most important right now. So for us, we are trying to make ourselves, be in the shoes of the customer and understanding, and this is the time where service charges is also becoming a much larger question. Do we pay the service charges? What about my job? What if I lose my job in the next couple of months? Do I conserve? Do I pay my bills? Do I keep going on? Do I go back? Do I go back to my country? It's a very uncertain time. And at this point of time, what we are trying to do is that keep the communication flow and make sure that people are comfortable, customers are comfortable in, being themselves. There have been a lot of customers who have come in and, asked, I've been on top of my service charge. I've been literally following everything. What happens if I'm not able to be a good customer anymore? Are you going to treat me the same? Are you not going to treat me the same? So I think this is the time where we are trying to change ourselves as a community, and also a community manager, and not just, being there for the customer, but also evolving, because none of our companies are going to be the same as before. Companies are going to change, and they have to change. And this is the time where we are seeing that we are personally changing the lookout of being a manager and looking at it, because at the end of the day, Alan goes back home. He lives in a community that is being managed by a community manager as well, and I go back home. And if we are not able to look at it from from a point of a customer, it becomes extremely hard. And that is one thing. Humanizing customer service and humanizing community management is something that we are looking at and that we are doing in our day-to-day businesses.
Well, we'll take in another comment, Mr. Allen. There's Glenn who wants to know your thoughts on this. Where will segregation and addressing concerns of residents and owners by different specialized teams lead to increase in happiness quotient for the community?
Yeah, I saw that. I think what Glenn's getting at there is that specifically with relation to COVID-19 or pandemic questions or the situation, he's saying that would it be helpful or better, in fact, to have a different specialised team that all of these sorts of queries could be directed to. And that specialist team, of course, would be well versed in all regulatory changes, advices, updates, and measures to be taken throughout the community, probably as well as outside the community, so that everyone is fully informed. I guess if you have the manpower to do that, or if you have the capability within your call centre to do so, by all means. But I still don't think that it removes the need for all people that are the touch points in a community, and really, I mean, the community manager or the portfolio manager that is specifically in charge of a building for whichever community management company it is. They've got to be completely aware of what's going on. So I think that while a specialised team would be a good thing, I think the obligation and the responsibility for every management company is to ensure that everybody that's working in the building or is facing the building or dealing with inquiries such as the call centre staff are fully versed with what's going on, and it's our obligation to make sure that everyone is educated to that regard. Talking about service charges again, I mean, back before pandemic, and it seems like a lifetime ago now, that we've been dealing with this. Service charges was the old chestnut. The life's blood of a building is income, and if we can't manage the building. And if you think about the fact that our budgets are only an annual sum for operational expenses, if we don't collect that money, we can't pay for that year's annual expenses. And when cash flow is restricted, I mean, things get very delicate in terms of having to pay Empower and utility providers, and there's always that threat of disconnection that looms over your head. And whilst the authorities have been a little bit more relaxed and helpful over this time, it doesn't remove the need that cash is the lifeblood of the community. So on top of people's general reluctance to pay service charges for whatever reason, we've now got the added complication of people losing their jobs, or having, as Sam mentioned, the fear of perhaps, should I pay my service charge, or should I put some money aside just in case I do lose my job, or all of the what-if scenarios that are cropping up in their mind are all factors that seriously affect our collection. And I know that, on the OA groups that we all have access to, one of the hot topics has been collections and how are we dealing with it. So, whilst it's nice to relax the rules, to give people a bit of a break, it then gives us the added problem of the stress of being unable to pay service providers on time, of having to make sure that there's enough money to meet the obligations towards Empower or DEWA specifically. And, so if you then roll that into happiness, which is really what the topic of today is, it would be a very unhappy building that has Empower turned off. So, our obligation, first and foremost, to keep our customers and our residents happy is to make absolutely sure that at the very fundamental basic level, all of their physical needs are being met. Once you have that platform, then you can start looking at all of the other variations to that are going to assist people. Given that we are seeing a massive change, a fundamental seismic shift in the way that we carry out our business. Where we were just functioning in the normal office environment, we're now moving seriously away from that. And I think many businesses, not just community management, but virtually every business on the face of the earth, is really questioning how how they will deal with this and what the workplace is going to look like going forward. So a large part of that is going to be much more people working from home, and more people working from home means more pressure on the community, because people are more reliant or are going to spend a lot more time in their community rather than out of it. So,
right.
there are all of the happiness quotient that we're talking about.
Yeah, that's right. And we have Mr. Tony who's made another comment. In fact, he says that we'll always now have a dedicated member specifically focused for these measures spoken about. And I don't want to bring finances into this, but I will. Now, there is a massive gray area of who is to pay for what, and OAs, etc., are demanding that these measures are implemented as per government guidelines, though no one seems to want to pay. So now these measures are now here to stay, and permanent structures will now be put in place to deal with these costs when tenders and etc. are floated. By what? By what in the meantime? So basically,
yeah, okay. So who pays? Well, clearly, everything that happens within a community is isolated to that community. So it's up to the members of the community what it is they want to pay for. No one else is going to come riding in on their white horse and do it for them. So in terms, he says he doesn't want to bring in finances, but it all comes down to finance, doesn't it? So there's another question here came from Shelley about, if this is going to be the new normal, are we then going to carry all of these regulations over and make changes in our fundamental or our foundation documents, presumably jointly owned property declarations and the like, and community rules? Will community rules be amended? It's hard to say. I mean, we don't know how long this is going to be with us. We don't know whether it is going to be a complete new normal that will remain unchanged as it is. One thing I can say is it certainly has changed in everybody's mind the way they see themselves living, their lifestyles. I, for one, I don't think my hands have ever been so clean in my life. I mean, I'm looking at them now. They're poor little wrinkly things. They've had the death cleaned out of them. So, everybody's doing everything so differently, and whether this will continue and whether there is a need to make permanent changes to documents, community rules, as Shelley suggested, that's yet to be seen. One would hope, we're all hoping that this will at some point go away, not maybe completely, but it will go away to the extent that we can carry out and conduct our lives as we've been accustomed to.
Definitely. I mean, it would go away, but I don't see us going back to being how we were. I mean, I'm sure everyone would agree that there are many things that just cannot be changed, and we just have to move ahead and, as you said, adapt to the times that we are in right now. So getting back into the agenda of our discussion, Mr. Samuel, what I want to propose to you is let's talk about technology. Now, how can community managers make use of technology to their advantage, especially in this situation? We have spoken about the SMS part of it, using that kind of a technology, but what else can they do to take this?
Okay, well, clearly the seismic shift in technology has been the way we conduct meetings. And was that directed to Glenn? Sorry, to Sam?
Yes, to
Sam. Go on.
Yeah.
I have this tendency to overwhelm the conversation. Sorry if I was butting in there, Sam.
It's perfectly okay. I used to work with you.
We'll definitely get into, because I know 360 is been doing a lot as well.
Used to me. We'd be in a board meeting and Sam could never get a word in edgewise. So the way it works, clearly the huge shift has been in the way we conduct meetings. We've moved right away from face to face, and everything now is Teams, Zoom, whatever. And I think the real surprise to us all has been how easy that transition has been. It was an absolute necessity. So in terms of technology, the way we addressed it was, when we saw this looming, we thought we would make absolutely sure that we had the right technology in place so that if work from home was required, we could manage that. And that comes down to making sure you've got proper VPN servers, that you can actually conduct your business, that you can access all of your shared drives, that you can do all of those things remotely that we're used to doing within a network, in our own office space. So for us, that was really important to absolutely make sure that we had the technology in place that we could seamlessly work from home. And, you know, it's interesting that if you don't do that, and I quote the case of poor old New Zealand, Immigration New Zealand decided that they would send all of their staff home when there was a lockdown, but they had no technology in place that those staff, 2,500 of them, could actually work from home because they didn't have any secure service set up for them to do so. And so, you know, that was the big thing for us, was making sure that the technology platform was in place to enable us to do that work as required. Secondly, I've mentioned that, you know, the virtual meeting has become really the hero of this. And as I say, what I think has really surprised everybody is how the virtual meeting has actually become a really efficient tool. And, you know, for myself, you know, I would travel from Abu Dhabi to Ras Al Khaimah to Oman, and I would spend a day or a half a day traveling just to go somewhere for a meeting. And now, you know, we've got that luxury at our own desk. And if anything, I think I've found that, you know, we're spending more time keeping in touch and communicating because the tool is just so easy to use.
That's right.
Sam, you better say something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what we are looking at right now is actually, you know, technology evolving to help people, and people are using technology in a way where you see iftars, online iftars of getting people together. One of my colleagues have been able to get part in online iftar where he is able to meet residents, not just residents that are, neighbors that are not just his neighbors, but across the block. And technology has helped us in a way where we are able to do a lot of contactless work in terms of security, dealing with it, security issues, or even communication part. It just makes it easier. And from what Alan said, it makes it so easy that we are able to address a lot of people, people across the world. And pre-COVID, a lot of people were apprehensive towards, you know, online meetings, and, you know, people had, like myself, I used to say I'm not photogenic, I don't want to be on camera, right? But right now you see a lot of people opening up for camera meetings, even residents asking for Zoom meetings to make sure that if they have a concern, they are answered quickly. And for me, it's more of the engagement, events prior and post COVID. So we're looking at events for, you know, kids that are able to come together, you know, meet each other in a community, also bringing the sense of community and making sure that, you know, it saves time. It saves when you have a event like, you know, Shelley has been talking about events and Linda has been talking about events as well. You're able to bring in a lot of people together and have a traditional meeting or an event, which costs a lot of time, but you're able to, you know, save time on all of this and bring people together much faster. Right now we are in different places. Alan's in Barcia, I'm here in Barsan, and we are able to get together, and even from different continents and everything. So technology has helped us tremendously to, you know, break the barrier and make sure that we are able to save time, you know, have contactless technology. And let's say going forward, because of COVID, you could be seeing a lot more technology that could help residents achieve, you know, paying of master community charges, community charges, and every other, you know, cards, access cards, you know, paying for it, you know, in a second and getting them delivered to their home. You know, you're looking at a technology that's evolving, and you're also able to look at, you know, the post-COVID situation where everybody is coming together, where everybody is pitching on ideas. You were able to see a lot of retail, a lot of businesses evolve and, you know, bring stuff together. Certain restaurants which do not even concentrate on delivery services are delivering to your apartments right now, and it is bringing people closer. And community management is also able to use this technology to bring access to information much more closer, you know, rather than before. 5 months ago, you know, information was not readily available. You still had to go see your manager. But right now, because of Zoom meetings and all of the online meetings, you're able to get information much faster in a snap. And this is for the good. For me, I personally believe that questions are being answered faster and people are being answered faster. And this results in much more happiness in the communities.
And also a lot of instant gratification is also being received in terms of, as you said, there's immediate kind of a
Exactly.
response that we get. So I completely agree with that. And of course, Mr. Allen, coming back to you, we realize that there's a lot of initiatives that even 360 has taken in terms of, highlighting technology to their advantage. So can you touch upon some of the initiatives that have actually worked in terms of bringing in more happiness at the communities?
Okay, well, again, happiness is, can be measured differently depending on who you're talking to. So I think that if we talked about happiness in terms of providing a seamless experience for our customers, that comes down to just the technology aspect of being able to communicate easily, being able to undertake activities such as payment or booking or getting NOCs or whatever, without having to have a face-to-face contact. So you've got to provide those elements in either your portal or your app to be able to do those things. Quick pay facilities, just making it as easy as you possibly can for people to conduct business with us. And the local, Etisalat and Dewa are obviously very, very good at that. Most of the banks also very good at that in terms of the increasing flexibility and ability to use their portals. They just get better and better all the time. So then you come to, well, what about the people who need something more? They need to engage in the community. Perhaps they are isolated. Perhaps they are in the building. They may not have a network of friends or family particularly, and they see that they want that need fulfilled from the community that they live in. And I guess that's why when we have a community, we do provide common facilities for people to enjoy and use. And some buildings have, a very wide range of facilities depending on, the nature of the building, and some have less. But at the end of the day, if we have people who are perhaps a little more isolated in our community, we need to be able to reach out to them in ways that, maybe we haven't had in the past. So, you might be conducting virtual quiz shows, or you might be conducting something that the children can engage in at a certain time. You might have, instead of having yoga in the gym, you might have virtual yoga so people can engage in their own homes. There's a whole, it's just a different mindset to what we've ever had before. We're having to think of how is it that we can engage with our community. And, all the way through the COVID-19, particularly the lockdown stage, we saw communities coming together to try and reach out a helping hand. And it might have been just as simple as helping someone out with grocery shopping or deliveries. It could have been, get to know your neighbour. Perhaps if they are in need, if they're feeling isolated, what is it that you can do to help them? And so I think that, for us as community managers, we need to be able to try and embrace that and engage in the community. Not everyone's going to need that. I mean, different people have different needs. I mean, I don't really need to, I don't have children here, so, I'm not involved or engaged at that level at all. But there are many people that obviously that's very important to them. So as a community manager, we need to look at, firstly, what kind of platforms we can use. And I think it all still comes back to being able to capture as much information about the people that live in our community as possible. We can't just leave it to chance anymore. We've got to be able to ensure that, our data, the information that we need is up to date as we can possibly get it. Because without that, whatever you do, whether it's going to be, broadcast messages or SMS, we must make absolutely sure that we have all of that information. Then we can start trying to engage with those that do feel socially isolated and, try and increase their happiness in which way we can. I think, perhaps the initiatives of getting the community to feel more engaged together, meet your neighbour, that kind of thing.
That's right. Well, Mrs. Samuel, we did speak a lot about, engaging the occupants, especially in a social scenario. But what are some of the other best practices that you have seen that have worked in order to reestablish this whole happiness that we are talking about right now for the occupants?
So So one of the main strategies that we've been using is making sure that the board members are engaged. Traditionally, we've been having a lot of board members who've been very vocal in terms of managing the communities. And we've been able to use these same board members to, disperse communication because they feel customers or communities have a sense of, making sure that they listen from their own. And when we're able to use these board members to as spokesperson for communities, it makes our job much more easier, and it makes it easier for us to bring the community together. So we have been able to liaise much more in a close connection with the board members, and making sure that they also lead the community. So this is one of the strategies that have been really helpful for us. And I also want to bring that Gary has mentioned here,
Yeah, I was going
cutting
to.
down the layers and layers of management. And this is something that I've been concentrating at, cutting it down and making sure that, one guy was not pointing to the other guy saying, you know what, if you want information, go to the other guy, right? Pointing hands, that becomes a problem in community management. You know what, I'm the FM guy, I'm the community guy, don't ask me technical questions, right? So this is a process where we are trying to concentrate and make sure that happiness is priority and getting access to information as priority rather than washing hands. So this is something that we've been concentrating at, and it's a very good point that Gary has brought up. And this is much more needed at this point of time to make sure that people are happy, and happiness is key. Ahmed Hamdani used to repeat it again and again. Happiness is everything. And this is one of our strategies as well. We are making sure that people at the end of the day are not hassled. Looking at it from facilities management, common area, community management, their happiness is key. Happiness could be anything. It could be subjective because, for a person like me, if somebody is going to ask me for my properties, don't pay a service charge, I'll be happy myself. But it's just that providing the proper happiness at the right time makes a lot of sense, and making sure that you reach the right people at the right time. And that's the key in making sure that you implement happiness in communities.
Sure. And I think it's also got to do a lot with the psychology. Like, you put the word happiness strategy in your plan, you're automatically thinking in that direction and you're heading there. So I feel that also kind of adds to that entire reaching the goal of happiness. So Mr. Allen, before we end up, wrap the discussion up, I want to ask you, what according to you is the actual need of the hour right now, especially when it comes to reaching that happiness goal post-lockdown?
Okay, well, I think we've covered the bases on a lot of that. The kind of things that we need to be doing. But I really, firstly, talking about boards. Of course, we're not dealing with boards anymore. We're dealing with committee members, and that's still sort of we're a little bit in the dark about how that's all going to pan out. We're still waiting for some more direction in terms of that. But I think that one of the biggest frustrations that we hear, and I guess we're getting a higher volume of calls because people happen to be in their home a lot more and they've got a lot more time to think about things. One of the biggest frustrations is, as Sam mentioned, getting to the right person. So doubling down on that, if somebody has a issue that they want dealt with, whether it's actually inside their unit or whether it's a common area issue or a security or housekeeping or whatever, the worst possible thing is making their complaint or their request and receiving an acknowledgement that has been received, and then nothing, hearing nothing, no follow-up. And so I think that as a community manager, we must absolutely be ensuring that we have the processes in place to make sure that any inquiry is dealt with efficiently, quickly, and to the satisfaction of our customer. Now, I'm sure many of our companies have conducted, or OA companies have conducted their own surveys. We certainly have. And I think that, a happiness quotient, particularly we've found this because of the massive increase in volume of calls, is that we must have processes in place to ensure that our customers' queries and requests are dealt with efficiently, quickly, and closed out, not just an answer and then nothing. We must deal with them efficiently. Often one of the frustrations I have as GM is if people aren't able to get satisfaction at whatever level they're talking, they feel they're not getting to the right person. They'll then escalate and escalate and escalate until it comes across my desk. and then I have to go back down the chain and find out, well, where did that break? Who didn't do what would have fixed this in the first place? And it's very frustrating for someone to have to keep going up the chain to try and get a resolution to something which could quite simply have been done much earlier on. So I think we as the community manager at this time, we must focus on that, which is all about communication and dealing with our customers' needs.
That's right. And of course, Mr. Gary also made another interesting point where he said happiness is subjective, what we've all said right now. We can't make everyone happy, but what we can do is do things quickly and efficiently. What the market is doing at the moment is making things slower and inefficient. So speak to your communities and owners and then deliver. So I guess that's why.
You might like to think that, Gary, but I couldn't possibly comment.
Good. Thank you. So I guess on that note, we are running out of time. And of course, when we talk about happiness, things just definitely time moved quite fast today. So I guess I really want to thank both of you for coming here. It certainly was insightful and quite engaging. And, we hope that this will definitely bring back the kind of a little much needed happiness into our communities and in our life in general. Now, if not, we're always here to talk about it. So which is why, I would like to extend an invitation to all of you to join us on our LinkedIn page, and, where we've opened up, I've kept the link out there in the chat box as well. So let's continue the discussion over there, voice out your opinions, your suggestions regarding this topic, and, we can keep this dialogue going on. I really want to thank all of you for your time and knowledge, and thank the audience for being part of Community Talks. And of course, I want to thank our key sponsor, Farnek, for supporting this initiative. So thank you again, and we will definitely be back next week with another interesting topic in place.
Thank you, Megha. Thanks everyone for listening in.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Yeah. Thank you, Alan.
Thanks, mate. Catch you later, huh?
See ya.